perfect, we're human, we're flawed. Just save us some grace for the sake of us all. We're holding that thin blue line, 'cause that's what we do. We don't do it for the glory, we do it for you.
Hello, Vax Choice and Clout Hub community. Thank you so much for joining us today for another episode of In the Lion's Den, hosted by Dr. Bill Lionberger. How are you doing today, Dr. Bill?
I'm doing great, Melissa. Excited to be here today for the show.
Yes, me too. We have one of my favorite reoccurring guests, Dr. Anna Maria Mihalcea. She's been a huge part of my whistleblower story, and she just continues to come out with more and more great research and evidence. And if you're not familiar with her, she is a board-certified internal medicine physician with a PhD in pathology and more than 25 years of clinical experience. As the president of AM Medical and founder of True Blue Medical, her work explores longevity, advanced wellness technologies, and the intersection of light, biology, and human health. She's also an award-winning best-selling author known for examining the controversial questions shaping the future of modern medicine and transhumanism. So it's going to be a very interesting show, as it always is with her, and I will be in the background enjoying it, Dr. Bill.
Fantastic. Today's show is a critically important topic. It is one that you can walk outside and observe, see. You'll get it on TikTok. You'll hear it on the news. You'll see people complain and go, why is this happening, right? And today's show name is Weather Warfare, Assault on Human Health. And it is right on in terms of the target of what we're going to be discussing. The first thing I'd like to do today is kind of show a little experiment. I remember seeing people going outside and, this snow won't melt and coming up with all kinds of ways to try to experiment and figure out, well, why is snow acting different, right? I mean, we're used to just regular snow growing up as kids, and now it seems to have taken on a different life. So if you would, Melissa, cue up clip 1. So here we are after minutes of trying to melt ice with fire, and all we do is melt it into plastic, and it turns black if we put the fire on long enough, but it's not dripping. It turns it into a plasticized amalgamation and smells like plastic that's been burned. Here I am, it turns shiny, turns like shiny like plastic, but doesn't melt. So that is kind of what people have observed all around the globe. They've tried these tests, they brought out torches, they brought out every kind of way to try to figure this out. I've noticed that the internet tries to sort of play it off in other kinds of explanations and ways, but when you tap on something, when it has a plastic film, when you smell it and it's caustic, I mean, just that knocks you over. It turns into a coal kind of substance and you can't find a drip of water anywhere. Obviously, something is amiss. And so I delved into plausible summaries and explanations of what this could be. And here's some of the information that I came up with. The snow appears to be coated or contaminated with substantial amounts of organic polymers, organic aerosols, and carbonaceous particulates, soot, plus refractory mineral particles. Now, I didn't do the labs on that, but that's what the research shows. When you burn it, you begin to have these kinds of things show up. When heated, the organic coating polymerizes rather than simply letting the underlying ice melt, producing a black soot, a strong burnt plastic odor. The charred melted polymer can form a hard water-repellent crust that temporarily slows or prevents heat transfer to the ice beneath, so the direct flame stalls melting. Mineral metal oxides and fly ash fragments are mixed within the polymer, can make the crust hard and refractory. That sounds like exactly the test that I did with the last big storm. Incidentally, the last storm, we had tremendous amounts of chemtrail days before. And the people that track that stuff were really commenting about how much that was going on. It appeared to be steering the storms, moving the storm, bringing it into place, and pretty much creating the very large sort of catastrophe in a lot of ways that people experience with that much snow and ice in their world. With that, I wanted to bring on our special guest today, Dr. Mihalcea.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
So there's our remedial experiment, right? Pales in comparison to yours.
It is phenomenally revealing, and it really is beginning to open the eyes of so many people that we've had weather warfare for a long time, and that we have to ask a lot of questions, because it's not just that this stuff is being sprayed and it's causing these storms, but these particulates also affect human health, which is the topic that we wanted to dive into today. And the implications are massive. So I think that we have lots to unpack today.
Fantastic. I'm been looking and watching this for some time, and to me, I think it's one of the greatest health hazards that we face, if not the greatest, because it is constantly being done. And I know that some states are trying to enact laws within their state that they can't be, sprayed, etc. But this thing is a multi-layered assault on humanity. You've got all the NGOs, you've got the military, you've got people go, what about all that? How could that be true? The reality is, it is true. It is happening. And we have all of these layers and kinds and ways that this is being done. And it is such a deadly matrix, a toxic matrix, if you will, that doesn't have our approval, right? I need to breathe oxygen, not chemicals. And there's other factors. I mean, what it does to the sun, it changes actually the ultraviolet light. We need the red spectrum also. We can't just be blue spectrum. And so there's a lot of different kinds of health implications. And maybe you could just touch on that a bit. And I know you have a PowerPoint you want to get into today, but give some of your thoughts.
So I've been talking for years now, also about this idea of fusing humans with machines. And what does that have to do with geoengineering? So one of my research colleagues was Clifford Carnicom, who for 30 years investigated the spraying of polymers as well as artificial intelligence, synthetic biologies from the sky that people were inhaling, and then they developed diseases like Morgellons. And we did the research, and we found that the similar chemicals were actually now in everyone's blood, and that the similar chemicals were also found in the patent for the COVID shot. So there's just so much overlap. But this idea of, for example, ice nucleation or weather modification. So what's been shown in patents is that, for example, polyethylene glycols has been used for decades now to modify the weather. There's certain nanotechnologies that contain components like magnetite, which is a magnetic material, a version of iron, as well as other metals. For example, we know about aluminum, barium, strontium. And the issue with this is that these metals that are being sprayed, including graphene, in massive amounts. So according to some whistleblowers Dane Wigington presented, it's about 40 million tons of graphene metals and polymers in a year, which is about an average of a credit card size amount of polymer plastics, metals, and graphene inhaled per person. So if you talk about an assault here that's cancer causing, that's creating an accelerated aging process, that's DNA damaging, it is phenomenal. And just into unpacking this issue, we can talk a bit more if Melissa could pull up the presentation. So really what needs to be understood is this is militarized warfare. And there was a research paper by the Air Force that discussed whether there's a force multiplier owning the weather by 2025. And experts and whistleblowers around the world, that particular, for example, Dane Wigington has helped to bring forward, have discussed that really for decades we haven't had natural weather. If you go to the next slide, so all of these storms, the hurricanes, the steering of the weather has been described within these documents. And this is to degrade enemy forces. You can enhance storms, as you see. You can cause droughts, like has been routinely done to California. We've seen these enormous wildfires that are then ignited with directed energy weapons. And these trees that are saturated with aluminum and other toxic metals, they just go up and are pulverized, literally. So you can see that you can create fog. So many people, again, in California and Oregon, the West Coast, have complained about this thick fog, makes people sick. So this can be used for concealment. You can modify the storm. You can make them stronger. You can make a hurricane stall over the Bahamas for days without any movement. And all of this can be utilized as a modality of war. If you are, for example, doing this to an enemy country, you can create major disaster. But the problem is that in this case, we're the enemy, the civilians, and we are being assaulted by our own secret government. Go ahead and next slide. So the issues, for example, are also the molecules. And what I was talking about for years is this idea of technocratic transhumanism. So the scientific advisors to the U.S. Army, Ray Kurzweil, for example, is a Google engineer, is a big proponent for transhumanism and technocracy, and ultimately posthumanism, the fading out of human biology. And what they want to do is basically digitize every cell, every biological organ system on Earth. And it turns out that the stuff that they're spraying from the skies are the same components that are needed to create smart dust, for example, which are biosensors that then can be sprayed upon the Earth and then are inhaled by human beings that can then have surveillance under the skin. And in the specifics, so magnetic control of this ice nucleation with this nanophase magnetide has been done very successfully. Polymers can be used as well. Magnetide also are carrier molecules in drug delivery. So you can actually encapsulate synthetic biology. You can deliver all kinds of things. There have been researchers for geoengineering who are exposing this, that in fact from the sky there's spraying mold spores. There was methotrexate, which is a chemotherapeutic agent, was found. So the toxic concoction kind of changes over time. Next slide, please. It's very important to understand that air pollution has substantial health effects. And this magnetite, for example, has been found around the world in significant parts per million. And headaches, anxiety can be found, but also significant effects on the central nervous system. This stuff is toxic to the brain. And you have people who are describing, extreme brain fog, and ultimately there can be neurodegenerative diseases that occur through the bioaccumulation of these toxic metals and polymers. We know from microplastics studies that now the human brain has about 7 grams of microplastic. That's about a tablespoon on autopsy in the brain. This increased by 50% since the rollout of the COVID-19 injections. But the same polymer plastics that are being found are also being found in the Antarctic ice, for example. example. And so that suggests that these polymers are also used to be sprayed around the world. Cardiovascular diseases, heart attacks, and strokes are increased, specifically because these are nanophase molecules that self-assemble. So as they grow larger, they can cause blood clots and problems. The reproductive system is affected. We know about these microplastics that each polymer plastic can exude up to 3,000 toxic chemicals that are endocrine disruptors. Certainly cancers can happen. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So what was very interesting was just to get back to COVID, that in Italy, the supposed virus was found airborne. And at the same time, the magnetite levels were at 2.5 parts per million. This research was done by my colleague, Dr. Janina Hagimov from Romania. And she kind of compiled it. And I think it's very, very interesting. If you go to the next slide. You have to also understand that magnetite interacts with the 5G system and can actually be utilized, for biological imaging as well. So at the same time 5G was rolled out, these air concentrations were also found. Next slide. And here is the research study that really shows that the human brain is severely affected, that this is so prolific in urban areas as a toxic pollutant, but that it enters the brain through the olfactory nerve, and this then can be affecting the brain through magnetic fields or electromagnetic fields, and literally be used also for mind control. So this is not just a hazard for human health, but then also magnetite specifically has been used very favorably for the brain-computer interface that's done wirelessly. So with these molecules and nanoparticles in your system, you can now literally have a read and write biosurveillance system within your system that was just aerosolized. And that's actually something that Dr. Giordani from Georgetown University discusses. They can just disperse a fingernail of nanoparticles and create the next pandemic hysteria as well as extreme anxiety in the population. Go ahead, next slide. So it's very important that there are specific interactions with radiation, but that also the nanoparticles are regarded as highly toxic. So why is a substance that's considered highly toxic being sprayed for weather engineering if there wasn't also an intent to damage all life on Earth, including humans? As you can see, lipid peroxidation, protein modification, and DNA damage, which can cause cancers, have all been noted. Next slide. It's important to understand, when you damage the brain, you are causing early dementia and cognitive decline. And in the United States, the average IQ has dropped substantially in the last several years, and cognitive dysfunction now, we call this symptoms of brain fog. That was never known about 15 years ago. We would call it what it is, and this is a very dangerous normalization of cognitive decline, even in 20, 30, and 40-year-olds, causing early dementia-like symptoms. Go ahead, next slide. Now, there are other researchers, for example, the Swiss team from Ursch, physicist Philipp Zeller, who've done enormous research on those filaments that are being sprayed. And these are polymer filaments, and they've found extremely toxic substances, some which have not even been identified or are not biochemically identifiable. They're unknown to man, but that these are flammable hazards that are significantly can cause cancer, all kinds of health problems. In order just to handle them, they had to use protective equipment. So this is what people are inhaling. And they've done enormous research on this. Go ahead, next slide. This was the electron microscopy work by Dr. Janina Hagema, who she noted that the rain on her window was containing these black particles, and she just held a magnet to them, and she could magnetize the particles. So she collected a rain sample and sent it for mass spectroscopy, electron microscopy, and you can see this network of fibers that they found. Go ahead, next slide. And the chemical analysis of carbon, silicon, aluminum, many different metals like titanium. Well, the reason why titanium and aluminum are interesting because in polymer chemistry, it is the start signal for self-assembling polymers to actually start to grow. So you have sulfur, you have phosphorus, and iron was also found. So magnetite is an iron-based molecule. So next slide. What she was considering is that these are silicon carbide particles that are fibers that are functionalized with metals that then have magnetizable properties, and this can be used in semiconductor technology and are actually the building blocks of smart dust, which is biosensors that are being used. So, these kinds of studies have been done around the world. Clifford Carnicom also did filament analysis sprayed from the skies, again, showing many different toxic heavy metals that can bioaccumulate in the body. There's other people who found similar findings. Go ahead, next slide. These are, again, some of the chemicals, and I just want to get your attention to things like, the aluminum content, extremely high. You have other metals and minerals like sodium. You have iron, so the iron can be the magnetite. You have zinc, you have arsenic, you have some cadmium, you have some lead. So we've even found uranium. I'm a certified chelation practitioner. In the last 3 to 4 years, the amount of uranium and cesium, both which can be radioactive, has substantially increased from what I've been pulling out of people. So again, most studies in metal toxicity are just with one metal. For example, lead has a half-life of 30 years in the body. It can cause everything from arteriosclerosis to dementia to arthritic condition to oxidative stress and inflammation. But no one has really studied if you have 20 different toxic metals plus toxic polymers plus undisclosed chemical burning hazards that can cause cancer, plus glyphosate from the food supply, because all of these toxins, they get on the plants, they get into agriculture, they're in the soil, then they get uptaken by, the animals that we eat and the plants that we take, and so we just continue to bioaccumulate, so you get a sicker and sicker population. No wonder, on top of that vaccination, we literally have an explosion of chronic diseases and cancers going on, and I think it's all contributing to it. Next slide. These are just a few more of the elements that were found. Lithium is a mood stabilizer. You can see barium and strontium. These are mitochondrial toxins, meaning they can cause chronic fatigue because the powerhouse of the cell don't work right. Go ahead, next slide. So other molecules are used, for example, vanadium, specifically used for biotech, semiconductor technology, for microchips. And these same metals we have found in COVID-19 injections. We know from the Argentinian group, we found 55 undeclared heavy metals, including lanthanides, that are also used for self-assembling nanotechnology. Go ahead, next slide. So I just want to remind people that there was a leaked NASA document that talked about smart dust, that the future of warfare circa 2025 would be through smart dust, combined sensors that float in air currents, and nanotechs that are placed on everything and everywhere, and that this microdust weaponry is a mechanized dust, which is distributed as an aerosol that's inhaled into the lungs, and this dust bores into the lung tissue and executes various pathological missions. So they can program it, to maybe cause cancer, cause a chronic disease, cause other things. So this is a wholly new class of weaponry which is legal, and part of this can also be explosive. I'm waiting for the time when literally our sky will catch on fire because of the toxic substances that have bioaccumulated. So I just again want to tell people that this is literally a war against humanity and all life on Earth, and that we're all within the receivership, because we all have to breathe that air.
Great presentation, really detailed. When we were kids, right, it was like we would go out and have a snow cone, and when the snow fell, and didn't think of it now, but now you would have a toxic soup for a snow cone. So it brings to light a bigger picture of don't eat the snow, right?
Absolutely.
It's basically a highly toxic, variety of neurologic damage and other kinds of things that could be caused. I did some kind of research on conditions. And what I learned when I looked at the toxins and I cross-referenced them to conditions is these toxins literally are at the very top of the list in terms of affecting every organ system of the body. Respiratory, cardiovascular, neurological, and you were spending some time on that. Headaches, dizziness, tremors, encephalopathy, seizures, lots of neurologic problems, reproductive issues, which seems like there's an onslaught to reduce the population, and this is one of them. Renal, urinary, hepatic, hematologic, immune system damaging, dermatologic, ocular, gastrointestinal. I mean, virtually every organ system can be seriously affected by these cocktails, or individually. And who's done the research when you mix them up? I mean, what kind of thing is that, right? Another question I have is, humans are supposed to get full spectrum light, right? And when you're altering some of that spectrum, I think that you also degrade human biology, right?
Absolutely, yes. I think that that's also part of the entire control system, because it's really about completely dimming the sun. If you look at, how much of this thick cloud cover we are now seeing, and, sunlight is so important for vitamin D production, for just overall feeling better. And you notice the seasonal affective disorder is way increased when you have these, dreary days. And so I think it's all related. And the other danger really is that if you go to an allopathic doctor, they know nothing about metal toxicity. Who knows if they even know about geoengineering, let alone about how to detoxify any of this. Because if you're not looking for them, then you're going to treat them. And so, certain therapies like chelation therapies and, vitamin nutritional therapies that help neutralize toxin. Vitamin C has been shown in high doses to neutralize just about any toxin on Earth. And so there's not the help to the people because the education isn't present in the regular medical field. So I think it's just very challenging. So people are just kind of saying, hey, we have all these turbo cancers, but there isn't a complete picture that's being looked at.
Exactly. I look at, you mentioned the turbo cancer piece, and you're right. The doctors really aren't either trained or don't want to know all of these other, ecological events that are happening right in front of our eyes to be a factor here, or a complicating factor for sure. And it means that you've got to have a bigger lens to look at these things, because maybe you need to have filters in your house and really work at trying to have a cleaner environment, in terms of what you breathe and what you take in. But when you go outside, all bets are off. And there was another interesting thing I ran across that had to do with these metals and microwave. And if you're ingesting and you're having a higher metal content in you, and then you're subjected to powerful microwaves, which can literally, with HARP and others, can really be quite amazing in terms of detrimental effects on human biology. There seems to be a correlation. Have you run across that?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, what you're seeing is that the higher the metal contents in people, the more the electrosensitivity is. And that's a literal, clinical syndrome now. People are just around this, even in young people, they have severe, severe symptoms and can't even handle it. And so what I've noticed is by detoxifying people from the heavy metals with chelation therapy, over time, this does get better. The problem is that, our cells have calcium channels. And for example, what's been shown with holding a cell phone, if you open the calcium channel and somebody, for example, has inhaled mold spores, which are also being sprayed from the sky, then the toxicity is increased by 500 times. So you can see that there's a certain sensitivity of some people who just can't participate almost anymore in this technological age because they're so affected. And the other part of it is, you mentioned the sun. We are bioelectrical beings, and we should be in harmony with all of the magnetic field, etc., of the Earth. Our alpha brain waves, they are synchronized with the Schumann resonance, and the military is actually messing with that. It's trying to change the magnetosphere. We have the HARP. We have so many different weapons that are, the extra low frequency belt around the Earth. So this is used for mind control. This is a complete change of the natural harmony of Earth. And this was all done in these black projects. We have not been asked, but this is our Earth. And so I think, somehow we have to break the cycle of this shadow government of secrecy that's using these technologies for weather modification for decades, poisoning everything. At some point, it has to stop. I don't exactly know how, but I think it needs to.
Wasn't there a military report from 1996 where they talked about weather as a force multiplier, right?
Yes.
And owning the weather. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I showed the slides and I showed how in that report from 1996, they clearly said, it's like, look, we can create these fogs, we can create these these storms, and that whoever owns the weather owns the world. That's literally what they were saying at that time. And this was from the US Air Force. And so, people have been denying geoengineering, but we've been seeing this for decades. And there have been activists who've been saying, it's like, look, this is a potential extinction level event. We have catastrophic decline of biodiversity. That's not, the climate change. This is man-made military poisoning of the biosphere. Because, for example, if you spray magnetite and the birds are inhaling it, they need the magnetic field, for example, for their navigation system. And if it messes with the natural natural, biorhythms and all of, their own physiology. It has huge impacts, the bees, all of that. You use nanoparticulates, poisons, they can cause enormous and tremendous destruction to the Earth's biosphere. So it's not just us that are affected.
I noticed when the whole Doge thing kicked off, and we saw like a reduction in maybe money going out or lots of light being shined on these NGOs, and there was a time that I noticed that the chemtrail effect, if you will, go from looks like it'll be a beautiful day, warm and sunshiny and gorgeous, to this crud, right? That you look up and you see. And I noticed that there was kind of seemed like a correlation between some of the exposure and some of that, but then it seems like it's coming back with a vengeance, So following the money has got to be important. Figuring out the layers of NGOs and people involved, and you go all the way to the military, and then why, the question is, why is the military raining this stuff down on its own population? There's an oxymoron all over the place. So, we've got to figure out how we approach it, attack it. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, awareness is slowly growing. You have all these legislative bills, for example, that are now being implemented, and I think that's all fantastic. But since it's a black project, there is plausible deniability by the government. So how can you legislate something that's, covered in this secrecy cloud? When Clifford Carnicom first put his analysis on the Morgellons on the internet, there were all of these agencies that actually visited his website, from the Department of Energy to every military agency to Kaiser Health Foundation to medical insurance companies. I posted that list. It's very revealing, to see really who potentially is involved in all of this. And then you actually look at, well, could there be also ties to the healthcare system? Because, the sicker the population, who actually benefits from that? Well, the allopathic medical system can create more pharmaceuticals. And why exactly is there an overlap of the chemicals put into, certain injectables in a stealth fashion, like we've seen with now all vaccines have metal nanoparticles, as nanopathologist Antoinette Gatti showed, but also, the COVID shots, and then the polymers. Todd Callender did an analysis where actually there were tremendous polymers found in the COVID injections as well. Why are they the same? And so this is where, to me, this technocratic transhumanism comes into play, because all of them are building blocks for human-machine fusion, as well as this metaverse construction. If you look at declassified documents, H.U. Packard was talking about in the 80s of basically plastering all of Earth with smart dust so they can garner all this data. You have this rapid increase in satellites. You have now AI. And literally, I recently rewatched the movie The Matrix. And if you see that scene where Neo was told that, look, there was this on the surface of the Earth, AI went rampant, it destroyed the atmosphere. I was like, that's what you're doing right now. And they, sprayed all this stuff to use humans as batteries. Well, the stuff in the blood is using us as a battery. So it's like the correlations are just, they're crazy. But as long as we hold on to our humanness, and know about this stuff, use certain detoxification methods, vitamin C is easy to take. It's a chelator. It can be your first line of defense, So those kind of things can be hugely helpful. And then if you want to grow your own food, do it in a greenhouse so they don't spray all this crap on it.
Fantastic. Just to shine the light on all of this. I mean, we saw an amazing amount of disclosure when it came to vaccines over the last 5 years, and we've seen a shift in thought processes and viewing it. We've seen people wake up all over the globe really and go, what am I doing, when they finally understand that when you can't trust the allopathic system, right? They buy the advertising, 60-70% of all the advertising they buy. They're the biggest legislators in the government. They control by the purse strings what gets voted on, what doesn't get voted on. And so you're right. We are kind of in this matrix that we've got to figure out how we get out of, right? And so, disclosing this and bringing it out and taking it one step at a time, like each individual state is going, I've had enough of this, and they've got enough people to actually bring it up for a vote and say, So I think I think there's cracks in the ceiling on it here and there, but go ahead.
My thought is, I just posted on my Substack this question about common sense. Okay, last year was a Cleveland a clinic study. Cleveland Clinic is like one of the top clinics in the United States. They did a study on over 50,000 healthcare workers and the effects of the flu shot on preventing the flu. And their study showed that the flu shot increased the incidence of flu by 27%. Okay, not only it didn't work, no, it made people sick by almost 30% more. And the new data this year shows that 46% of Americans went and got their flu shot. I'm like, where is people common sense?
It's bowled over, it's run over by the advertising machinery, right? I mean, they literally, you go into the drugstore, and they're advertising, you get your free shots today, right? I'll get your COVID and get them together and combine them, and we'll get it all done for you, right? It's free to you today. I mean, it's literally, they're probably still giving out suckers. I don't know, but I think that the machinery is still in full bloom. I know they've got a problem, and I've heard them even in Davos talking about, we have to make a shift, and so because the light's shining on them, but we can't let up. We've got to continue to really bring the pressure to bear. Yeah, it defies logic. So much of this is defied logic because people have been, spoon-fed this stuff for so long. It's hard to get them out of that matrix. And, that's what we're here to do, is to try to do that. So if you were going to give your impression of maybe the top 5-6 things somebody can do to protect themselves from this aerosolized toxic spray, what would you come up with?
So, I'm a huge fan of EDTA. It increases the excretion, for example, of lead by 4,800%. It is, if your kidney function is fine, you can use it in an oral version. Vitamin C is a chelator. You can use spirulina, chlorella, those kinds of things that help detoxification. Glutathione is very helpful. Less time on the cell phone. All this magnetic stuff is interacting with your physiology and kind of exacerbating it. And then in terms of, be careful of it, maybe have good air filters, try to drink water from, sources that are clean. And a lot of stuff that you buy in the store has continued microplastics, etc. So, if you can, have your own well water, use only glass, don't use plastics, and eat organic if you can, grow, buy locally, maybe in people who have greenhouse, and you just do the best you can. You can kind of lose hope in all this morass, but I think that keeping our spirits up and also enjoying our life and doing the best we can in our lives to educate our children, to our neighbors, and to do good to the environment that's also suffering, and live in harmony with it. I think that's really important. In a sense, it is pressing us, I know for me, to just appreciate life and every moment of it, and how blessed we are that we're still here. My God, they haven't killed us yet. That's just insane if you consider what we're up against.
Well, they're making some serious inroads in our ability to procreate, right? We've seen a collapse, really, of our ability to replace ourselves as a species. And that we did a show on that not too long ago, but that's a major problem, and it's also attacking us from every direction. You can look up in the skies and you can see the muck. The microwaves, you don't really see those, okay? And the way that they vibrate your cells, and our biologic beings are all about vibration, okay? Having the intermix of vibration and healing is critical. And when you mix in all these other things, I mean, when you look at stands of trees that are around these big towers, you see these stands of trees that are just becoming dead, right?
Yeah.
There's your indicator. You may not see it like you see it in the sky, but you can see the effect of it just by looking at what's around these cell towers. You talk about chelation. Is there a risk or an issue with people that might become hypertensive with the chelation, or is that pretty safe for them?
So actually, it's been shown that if you pull, for example, metals like lead out, which causes hypertension, then you can help to regulate blood pressure very well. I mean, I always recommend, it's like, look, people need to have their kidney function tested, and if you find a naturopathic or integrative doctor who knows about this stuff, they can also guide you. So in low kidney function, you wouldn't use EDTA, but in general, it's actually very, very safe. And see, one of the things is also you have to consider, well, the toxicity of all this stuff, right? So sometimes in one IV, I'll pull out over 2,000 micrograms of lead alone. If you think about that, what do all of this extreme assault in the body do, and how accelerated the aging process has become? So that alone will shave off maybe decades off of people's lives. So we have to do something, and I think that more people need to learn about it. I'm a huge fan of DMSO as well. It's a free radical scavenger. It does amazing. It dissolves plastic like polyvinyl alcohol. It dissolves amyloid.
And these
we
are safe.
have.
I mean, yeah, DMSO is safe. You'll go to the internet and you'll look it up, and of course, pharma has captured the narrative, and it'll look like it's one of the most dangerous things. Well, it's really not. I mean, having had horses, DMSO is really helpful. We go back to the horse medicine.
Yes, and at the University of Oregon, they use DMSO infusions for individuals who were paralyzed after motor vehicle crashes, and they'd regenerated their spinal cord. So they've used it in big medical settings very safely. It's been used in the NFL, and there are wonderful books about this. But there's so much disinformation. There's so much disinformation about EDTA chelation. It's been shown to reverse arteriosclerosis. The government of Denmark did a study on EDTA chelation on over 500 people because they didn't want to pay for their coronary artery bypass graft. So they paid for 40 chelations, and 95% of people no longer needed a bypass and cleaned out their arteries. And the cost of treatment was $5,000 for the 40 chelation versus $200,000 for the coronary artery bypass graft. And they said, we'll pay for it. So, some things are, again, just logical sense. There's so many people who are just spinning nonsense out there, like methylene blue will turn your brain blue. I'm like, you fool, methylene blue has been shown to help, increase the oxygenation of tissues between 30 to 70%, helps neurologically phenomenally, regardless of the reason for the mitochondrial dysfunction. It delivers the electrons so that we can make ATP. In global brain ischemia, it's done amazing in studies. So there's just, again, a lot of disinformation by people who have no medical education, do not know how to use this in clinical practice, and therefore are creating fear in the marketplace against solutions that would help us in a war situation. We're right now in war. This stuff that's sprayed from the sky, all of this, what we are exposed to, is used for one purpose: to decimate the human population. And so I think that we need to become more open-minded and more respectful towards those people who want to bring solutions to humanity.
Wow, incredible. We're at the phase in the show where I want to do some Q&A, bring Melissa back on and ask some questions of you while we've got you here. Go ahead, Melissa. How you doing?
Good. So I enjoyed the show as always, Dr. Anna. I guess one of my questions I have kind of is more for Dr. Bill at the first, because I've seen videos like what he did with the fire. And I guess one of the questions I have that I never get answered on the videos is, What was the temperature outside when you did that test?
It was a temperature cold enough to keep the snow from melting, but it was not like -5 degrees. You know what I mean? It was probably in the 30s, I would say. In our area, we don't get down.
Still warm enough, even though it's below freezing, your fingers would still melt the snow because you're warmer than the air
Well,
around it, and it wasn't doing that, right?
well, you would think that's the case, but there was another piece to the experiment I didn't show, and that is that we took the snow and put it on the stove in a plate, and then we put ice, okay, and then we slowly melted them until they boiled. Now the ice that was came through a filtration system came to a boil with fine boil. The snow from outside came into these big bubbles of some kind of, almost like you put in some kind of bubbling soap,
Like soap and
and
bubbles
began
of
to like
water.
create these amorphous bubbles and wouldn't even come to a rolling boil. It was some other kind of concoction. We were just like, what is that? We're definitely not going to drink that. But another piece of the experiment, because you're just curious of what's going to happen, right? Anyway, the rest of your question.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, if the snow wasn't melting with fire, why is the snow gone now when it's warmed up? I guess I don't understand. That's my big question
Well,
is, yeah, it wasn't melting under the fire, but why is it gone now? It eventually melted, right?
here's an interesting observation from what we had with this snow is we ended up with 70-degree weather, and we're sitting around going, when is this going to melt? It would just wouldn't melt. And the texture on the top was a very fine pellet, like I'm talking a millimeter or 2 millimeter size pellets, like billions of them. And we would walk on it, and it would just sit there and sit there for days. And finally, it sort of just fell apart. But I'm used to, when the temperatures rise up, things really melt down, because that's the laws of thermodynamics, right? That's how they work. So it was a very different experience, and we're more focused in on that now, so we're paying more attention to it. Obviously, that's a factor, but anyway, it seems highly abnormal based on our view. Doc, your thoughts?
I think that's absolutely right. Dane Wigington also talked about how a lot of the snowfall sometimes was in 50-degree weather and the snow would stick. So it just, again, ice nucleation is a chemical reaction that can create the precipitate, at much higher temperature than usually needed for water to become ice. So I think that's one of the clues that this is a completely unnatural chemical process.
And I've also read that when they spray these chemicals, and I don't remember the exact ones, but when they spray them, they actually can form these storms and these snowstorms with lower temperatures. It doesn't have to be as cold for them to manipulate the weather and make these events happen. So, anyway, next question, Melissa.
Yes. Do you know, are you aware, is there anything being done at the national level to combat this? And if so, what is it?
I know that there's people, these legislative bills that are being introduced, even in Washington State, in my state, to ban geoengineering. But again, the problem is, the sky doesn't have a boundary. So you have these states, right? But the aerosols, they can also travel. And then again, because these are black military projects, it's the military that's in charge of, these spraying routes, and they're usually off the regular commercial routes. You can have certain air carrier that are also spraying this stuff, and there have been whistleblower testimonies from pilots who were basically told, you have to click that chemtrail button for the chemicals to release, otherwise you're going to lose your job. So I'm just not sure how effective this national level is if the military is involved in Black Project. I think that we need to revoke some of the top secret classification on these projects, and then maybe we can have a say, maybe as a global population, because if the military is thinking this is great for warfare, maybe just like with nuclear weapons, there needs to be a treaty worldwide saying, okay, if we kill our planet, that's not good for anybody on this earth. So maybe we should come up with a peace treaty and not use these weapons.
Well, do you think that kind of clarifies something else? We just had a guest on not that long ago that said, Florida made chemtrails illegal, but there's still chemtrails. And is that just because obviously state law is different than the federal law? So it's obviously higher up than just state doing it. It's greater than that. And you said military. I didn't really think the military could operate independently, but I guess that would make sense when the rules are made up and the points don't matter. Essentially,
entire shadow government under the umbrella of the CIA, the intelligence communities, that is above top secret, that is it's a criminal enterprise without congressional oversight, that has created these illegal programs, and yes, they do whatever the heck they want.
And they have Black budgets that are huge, and they don't have any oversight over those either. And so who knows all the things that they have planned and are doing, but somehow, some way, we're going to have to continue to exert enough pressure so that they can't get away with it, right? One last question, Melissa.
I have a question for Erica, and I'm going to bring her in because her question, I think, is good. What is the point to disseminating the human population?
Yeah, what is the point of it? Like, what's driving the need for this depopulation?
Okay.
How about that?
I just wanted to make sure I was saying it right. Okay, so
yeah, you were.
Okay, all right. I'm going to pull you back out, and I'll ask now. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, my last question is, what is the point to disseminating the human population?
So population control has been a long-standing idea by an elite group. Again, this technocracy is also founded through eugenics, this whole idea that the planet is overpopulated, that there are some elite people that are more worthy than the deplorables to live, and that basically they want to own the entire world with all of its resources, and have us gone. And so remember the Georgia Guidestones, they want to reduce the population to 500 million. Remember the Freudian slip by Bill Gates saying, if we do a real good job with vaccines, we can lower the population by about 10%. So they've been doing this for a long time. It's in their literature. It's the ultimate, I believe, fundamental root of technocracy and transhumanism lie in Satanism, the disdain of life. So it is just this superior elitism, but you can find it in many different pathways of thinking, and they're hell-bent of getting it done.
Yeah, the depopulation agenda in all of its flavors and colors. I wanted to give you the final word, Doc, in terms of final thoughts, where we go from here. And it's been a great show, but go ahead.
My final thoughts is, again, what makes us human is our tremendous capacity to love, to endure, to make better our world one-on-one, and we just take one day at a time. I have to say that this has been like a long journey, and sometimes I've been just like tired of it, and I just go and I hug a tree. I kid you not, or I spend time with my dog, and I'm just grateful that I woke up today. So I think, getting back to the basics of what makes us human, why are we so special, why is life special, then maybe as more and more people wake up to that, maybe we'll start to live in harmony with nature and with our earth, and that eventually it will change the vibration and the consciousness so much that even those in power will somehow evaporate on a future timeline.
And
Thank you for having
we will find ways to defeat it. And, you know, recharging is important. But Dr. Anna, I want to thank you so much for coming on today, taking the time. Great insights. I look forward to another show. And thank everybody for tuning in to In the Lion's Den today. Take care.
Thank you.
Blue lights and sirens, yeah, it's time to go. No time to defund us. You should know that we're not perfect. We're human, we're flawed. Just say to some grace for the sake of us all.